Hi everyone, I'm Jorge Fontan and I'm an architect, and I want to talk about getting a zoning variance in New York City. A zoning variance is a special approval to develop a property in a manner that is not 100% in compliance with the zoning code. This means your proposed development contradicts one or more zoning codes. So you have to get a special approval, which is a discretionary action. This means that it is not something that you are entitled to. You have to make a case for it, and they will decide on a case-by-case basis as to whether or not you should get the zoning variance. The Board of Standards and Appeals are the ones who grant zoning variances, and you have to file with them in order to achieve it. So normally what you do is you file with the Department of Buildings first. The Department of Buildings will give you an objection based on a zoning code that you're not in compliance with, and then you go to the Board of Standards and Appeals and file an appeal with them. They will make a discretionary decision based on your particular case. Last week we had a hearing at the Board of Standards and Appeals, and they voted in favor of granting a zoning variance for one of our projects. This is a clip of our BSA hearing where they voted in favor of our zoning variance. It was done via Zoom and live streamed on YouTube during the New York City lockdown. It's not very exciting, but you can see them voting in favor.
Okay, so then I would like to make a motion to grant, unless somebody has something they want to add. Commissioner? No? Okay, so motion.
Okay. Motion to grant, Chair Perlmutter,
Aye.
Vice Chair Chanda.
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Sheta,
Aye.
Commissioner Shabeta.
Aye.
So I'm going to run through getting a zoning variance using this as an example. The property in question is in Astoria, Queens. It's a 21-foot wide by 100-foot deep property in an R5 zoning district. We had a challenge on this property because of the shape and size and the existing conditions. The problem is that the property at 21 feet wide required one side yard of 8 feet, which means the buildable area, which is this red, would be 13 feet wide. So the entire house, counting the exterior walls, would be 13 feet on a 21-foot wide property with an 8-foot empty space side yard. For us, this was a serious problem. For our client, this was an even more serious problem. So we proposed a full development shown here of 21 feet. This red is what we were proposing to build on, and the empty space is a front and rear yard, which we were happy to provide, but we were not providing the side yard. Because the zoning code requires this side yard, we could not get this approved as of right. As of right meaning that you have the right to do it, that you're 100% in compliance. Just go ahead, get it approved by the Department of Buildings, and you can do it. That's as of right. Okay, this 13-foot wide house would be the as of right condition. This is the variance condition, which is not an as of right condition. This is a discretionary action, which we filed with the Board of Standards and Appeals, and they just voted in favor last week. So I want to go through a few points here. If you want a variance, it's not just because you want a variance. I want to build a bigger building because I'm going to make more money, or, they don't care. That's completely irrelevant information. It doesn't matter what you want to do, okay? Their zoning code outlines very specific requirements to qualify for a variance, okay? First, you have to have a unique condition. This is maybe a little subjective to some people, but you got to look at the area, okay, which we did, and we looked at the whole area of that neighborhood, a certain, perimeter that we looked at, and analyzed how many properties have these 8-foot side yards, and of the ones that do, are they as narrow as ours, or are they wider than ours, okay? That is a unique condition. Because our property was narrower than most properties with a side yard by a vast majority, it meant that we qualified as a unique condition. They're going to take this really seriously. This is the first thing that you really have to think about. If there is nothing unique about your property, nothing unusual, there's no reason for you to get a zoning variance, okay? So you have to prove the unique condition. Next, hardship. The unique condition should cause a hardship. You have to have some kind of problem that you're trying to resolve. This is not just because you want it. It's because there's a problem and we're fixing the problem. So the problem here is that following the zoning code gives me a 13-foot wide house. This is just not great. And remember, that's measured to the exterior walls. You have the thickness of the walls. The interior of the house, way too narrow, not livable. The house would be very devalued. We wouldn't be able to maximize the floor area ratio for the property. It would be a serious problem, okay? So making this land less valuable than it should be, and the house really less functional than it should be. That was the hardship created by this unique condition. We solved that hardship by building a full 21-foot wide house and requesting the variance. The next important thing is conforming to the character of the neighborhood. If you're planning a development in a neighborhood that has all 5-story buildings and you want to propose a 20-story building, you're probably not going to get a variance, okay? You can try, but it would be highly unlikely. They do not want you to ruin the neighborhood. They don't want you to land a spaceship here that's going to be completely out of place. You have to do something that makes sense. Ours was totally fine with this. Our building was no larger than any of the other houses. We were proposing a townhouse. There's lots of houses in this area. There was even some multifamily apartment buildings that were even bigger than ours that we were not exceeding. So this was really easy for us to kind of fit into. Of course, there's a lot of evidence that you have to supply, drawings, maps and such information. So, but this is really important. If you're doing something that's going to completely, contradict the kind of urban fabric of the area, that might be a problem. And this is really subjective. So, really, take this into consideration when looking at a zoning variance. But a very important issue. The next one is also a little bit of a problem, is minimum variance required. What would be the minimum variance required when you're filing? So if you want to build a wider house, well, why can't you build 15 feet? Why can't you build 17 feet, 18 feet? Why do you have to build the full 21 feet? So you have to kind of, look at that issue, which we did. We presented that, developing this property with a 4-foot side yard would be still problematic, and that the full width would be a much more optimal solution, and that it really would be required to make this a fully functional townhouse, especially to satisfy other zoning requirements such as parking. We have an indoor garage. Parking is required in this zoning district. So we looked at all of those things, and happy to say it was approved. So first we have to get community board approval. You go present to the community board. In our case, in this project, you voted unanimously in favor. Nobody was really against it. They all saw very clearly that this was something that made sense. You need to see the borough president about this. You need to go file with the Department of Buildings and get a formal objection from the Department of Buildings. They're not going to review the entire job, and you have to complete your Board of Standards and Appeals application and get that approved before the DOB finishes their full review and gives you an approval on the project. So in this case, we still don't have DOB approval on it, but we hopefully will soon. But we did get the vote in favor. And then you have to have the BSA hearings. Usually you're going to have more than one hearing. They're very particular about these things. So you need to have a really tight application. Your whole package, all your documentation drawings have to be very clear and very, to the point. And I can't emphasize the presentation. They will tell you that your presentation is lacking, or if you do a good presentation, they're going to tell you that you have a good presentation, and this is really critical. All right, so the BSA hearings, you really have to have your act together when you go in front of the BSA. This next clip is from our Zoom meeting review session. This was about a month before the vote. So even though they review it and the review goes well, you still gotta wait another month for them to vote. And then once they vote, you still have to wait for all the paperwork to be processed. This is a huge process, not to mention that this was not our first review. We had previous hearing and we were responding to comments from that hearing. So I just want to show this because she points out that the submission was complete and thorough, and to emphasize how important this really is.
I want to say this submission was very thorough and responsive to the board's comments, I thought.
I'm going to show one more clip. This one is of our first hearing at BSA. So this was before COVID and it was, under the normal settings. You can see Frank, he's a zoning lawyer. He's presenting. He's from Sheldon Lobel PC that we worked on this. It was really great working with them. And I want to show this clip because of it's me getting laughed at by the Board of Standards and Appeals. So I'm showing it for two reasons. First is that I have a sense of humor and I'm willing to laugh at myself, and two, that I want to make a point. I'm getting laughed at because I'm giving them a contradictory interpretation of a zoning code. Now, the issue here is that I've actually discussed this exact zoning code with the Deputy Commissioner of the Queens Department of Buildings and concluded on a interpretation with him. Then I appear before BSA and I tell them his interpretation and I get laughed at.
Just
State your name, please.
first.
Oh, Jorge Fontan. I'm an architect, Fontan Architecture. I believe the Deputy Commissioner in Queens has a different interpretation of that based on a conversation I've had with him. That
A different interpretation of what it says?
that the building, I'm sorry, can I clear?
Yeah.
That the 50%. The following week, I went back to meet him and I told him what happened and he confirmed that his interpretation is correct. So why am I telling you this? I tell every one of my clients this. If I ask 3 different people the same question in New York City, I will get 3 different answers. And this is a kind of a problem, the DOB Deputy Commissioner says one thing, the Board of Standards and Appeals is saying another thing. Now, in this particular case, we were able to comply no matter which interpretation we placed, whether it was the BSAs or the DOBs, so we were fine. But this is kind of a problem that arises. Sometimes you'll have more than one person in even the same department having different interpretations. So you're just going to have to deal with that. I want to emphasize how much of a process getting a zoning variance is and how important it is that you comply with all of the requirements and the findings in order to qualify for a zoning variance. This is a big commitment. It's going to cost a lot of money in legal fees, architectural fees, and a lot of time. You're not getting a zoning variance in under a year, could take 2 years. It's really a large process. Comment below, hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to see more videos like this. Thank you for listening.